So I thought I would share with you the seller finance model, the installment sale, which is a really great opportunity and both for the investor and obviously the purchaser. So in a traditional sale, when someone wants to buy a property, they find a property, they negotiate a price, they then look to see if they can get finance from a bank. The bank obviously vets them, checks them, and then comes up with an interest rate and repayment plan for them. And then if it all goes through, then that loan, that finance is put against the property on the deed so that therefore the investor owns the property and obviously the bank has a mortgage on that property. The challenge with this, as we all know, is that if the investor defaults or does not make their payments, well, then the bank has to obviously foreclose on that property to get their money back, which can sometimes be a pain, and most banks obviously don't want to do that. So in the installment sale, what can happen is sometimes we're asking the seller if, for example, they might have actually paid cash for the property. So they have a property that's unbonded. If they want to be the seller financer, so in other words, they want to be our bank. So we approach them and we negotiate terms with them in which we buy the property from them, but we are paying them the installment. So in this case, the property does belong to me. It's registered against we both are registered, but I have title to the property, so I have full rights to the profits, to the income, to all the expenses, etc., etc. But the seller also has rights in case I default, right? If I do not meet my payments, then the property defaults back to the seller, and therefore there's a security from both parties. And of course, this is all legal. It's done by law and by special conveyances. And usually the terms are between 1 and 5 years, can be extended because the installment sale is a package, a product that aims to meet that kind of market, especially with people who can't maybe get credit because they've got bad credit at the moment, but they want to buy a house. So this is how it would work, an installment sale. It's like a subject to buying the property, subject to the seller being the financier. Now that is difficult to find in South Africa because we're having to find sellers who are wanting to be the bank for us. And that isn't always the case because in South Africa, we often know that sellers actually just want their money to go and obviously buy another house, or they would rather have a different investment strategy. So I've been working with a company where what they do is actually quite innovative and solves a lot of problems. And this is what could work also for you, is we are, again, as the purchaser, the buyer of a property, I'm finding a property that I'm wanting. I negotiate a cash buy, a cash offer with that seller, right? Because as with a cash offer, I can get it lower, at a lower rate or lower amount, and obviously that's going to work in all of our favors. Now, instead of trying to get that seller to be my bank, this company is one where they will then go in and buy that property cash, and therefore that property is now sitting in that company's name. Let's call this the angel investor, right? So that angel investor now owns that property in their name. So they've bought it outright, done a full legal process of transfer. And then I now enter into an installment sale agreement with that angel investor on the terms that we find that is going to be best, whether it is 5, 10, or 15 years. Usually I would suggest 5 years renewable. And in that way, again, both of us are protected. But why this is so useful for the angel investor is because if I default or if something doesn't work, they don't have to foreclose on the property because it's actually already theirs in their name. And the installment sale is just an agreement, which therefore, if I default on, it reverts back to them. So therefore, they have huge security on that property already by default. The benefits to the angel investor, again, are because in an installment sale, traditionally, you're looking at about prime +1 or +2 above, obviously, for the interest rates. So there is a markup. So it works for the investor if they're wanting to get a greater return on their money, on their cash, than if they put it into a money market, right? So that's one of the benefits. And of course, for the purchaser, well, this means that I can now actually have an agreement with the angel investor as opposed to trying to negotiate that with the bank. Now, what's interesting with the company that I'm working with is they obviously have some criteria because they're not going to go and do this with just about anyone. Their criteria are the following: that the property that we're going to buy is between 500,000 and 300,000 and 3 million rand. So they're looking at in between that amount. it must be your second investment property, right? Or at least second or more your investment property. In other words, you have to have at least one investment property, which basically implies you are an investor, right? You're not just, oh, I want to get into investing. How does this work? You already are an investor or have experience as an investor. And thirdly, what I actually really like, because obviously it works well for me, is that you need, as the buyer, to have a coach or a mentor or someone who's going to help you through this. Again, not allowing just the mom and pop investor to say, oh, I want an installment sale, let's just make this work and let's just go and buy a house. They're looking for obviously to decrease their risk, right? And if it's between that price bracket, if it's you already are an investor and you also have a coach or a mentor who can guide you through this process, then that's really going to be, top for you. In my case, what I would prefer and what I would look for in this is where we're also looking at the purchaser to put down, for example, 3 or 4 months reserves of that installment of the mortgage. And the reason is because even if the property still is in the angel investor's name as such, the risk is that if I default, that angel investor will still have to evict me from that process, or in this case, evict my tenants. And that could still take 3 months to do. So we want to make sure that the angel investor is not losing any of their money, such that we also, a requirement would be is that they have 3 to 4 months of the mortgage payments in reserves, such that if that happens, well, at least the angel investor can still be getting their installments as opposed to now just waiting for a 3-month eviction process. So that for me is a big one. And in my case, I actually even go a step further, which is the tenants that I use as the purchaser. So in my case, I like the student housing. So I'm wanting to obviously have different tenants who are going to be staying in the house that I'm going to buy. I actually use a rental guarantee on those people. So I actually can guarantee the rental that I'm going to get in, which means therefore I can obviously literally guarantee the installment repayment. So that is probably another requirement that I would suggest for anyone who's going to do an installment sale. And of course, this is all about minimizing the risk for the angel investor so that either way, just everyone wins, right? And I think what I would also add on the fourth level is therefore making sure that whatever the purchaser, so myself or yourself, are wanting to buy through an installment sale, that first and foremost, it's a good deal, that those numbers work, that the rental that's going to come in is going to cover the installment, is going to cover everything, the expenses and every other foreseeable, the maintenance, the rates, the taxes, the insurance, obviously the electricity or the water, if that is going to be prepaid, plus maintenance funds, all those different things is the requirement, right? And that is something which I think is absolutely essential. So in that process, then one can expand the portfolio, obviously with certain means, but it really is a great opportunity for both this so-called angel investor and, of course, for yourself to expand your portfolio, but under requirements or under certain criteria that mean that this is a reliable, replicable, and with the least amount of risk possible. And that is how I certainly would structure this for you and what I look for in my own portfolio.